they're like, he may need to learn how to walk again. So like in the ICU, I think my first walking was with a wheelchair and then three nurses around me around the nursing station. And so you go from like this high functioning, like independent, 17-year-old to like needing people to walk with you, right, in a matter of days.
This is Health Unfiltered, the podcast where we cut through the bullshit and get honest about fitness, nutrition, and mental wellness.
Daniel, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you both for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Definitely. We're glad to have you. We're gonna have a real interesting discussion today.
Mm.
We're also blessed to have Brandon Morris, our co-host and senior mental health correspondent with us.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going, guys? Glad to be here.
Good. Very good. So Daniel, before we get into the topic, which is going to be traumatic brain injury and recovery methods, I want to get to know you a little bit more. Do you want to let us know how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it started with the traumatic brain injury itself, kind of pivoting my life trajectory. Um, and I think like for a lot of people, if we can, you know, notice or use some of those adversity challenges, whatever it might be, right, that can really become self-defining. Um, yeah, I mean, so really that the car accident was probably the pivotal piece, and then the months thereafter. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, after that, I was senior in high school, and then undergrad in social work, master degree in social work, and then licensed clinical social worker. So I have a small practice here in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and then licensed also in Colorado too.
Very cool. So you experienced a TBI in high school, and that was in a car accident.
Yeah, it was just a one car rollover. So
Oh
uh,
man,
yeah,
scary.
yeah, it was. I was a passenger, and I think it was four rolls. So.
Wow.
Hmm.
So how was that experience for you? Did you were you like knocked out? Were you conscious the whole time? Like how did you feel afterwards?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So I was knocked out. So the last thing I remember, like seeing some like circuit colors on one of the dash panels. Um, and then they put me in a medically induced coma for 3 days. So when I came
Oh.
to, I actually thought I was in France. It was very bizarre. I don't know what it was. Like I was like, did I just go through the time change? Like, even though I'd gone through time changes before, looking back, I can laugh at it. But when I was kind of like coming out of it, I was like, what happened? And it was
Mm.
almost like these dual events because like I don't remember this, but even before I started coming out of it, well, I guess as I was starting to come out of it, I asked how the driver was. So I knew on some level something had happened, but on another level, I thought I was in France. So it was this really, really strange duality.
How bizarre.
It was. So yeah, so came it was a 3 days coma, and then for the next few days they would put me in the evenings, and then take me out during the day and stuff like that. So um,
Oh,
and then yeah, 10 days ICU, 7 days inpatient rehab, 3 months physical therapy, 2 to 3 sessions a week, and then 17 months of speech therapy for usually 2 to 3 times a week.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a haul.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. So you had
Mm.
trouble speaking afterwards?
Well, they said maybe I would, but they didn't know because I was in a coma. But the part of the brain that I injured is the temporal lobe on the left side. So that is a lot of our speech, memory, um, word, everything that goes into, I don't know, our brains are so interconnected, but they all have
Yeah.
special regions. But yeah, so the speech part, they were like, he might not talk, he may be able to talk, we don't know. But the speech therapy itself was actually focused on like concentration and like being able to to switch between tasks and then like pick up where I left off in previous tasks and kind of holding that working memory.
Hmm.
Uh, that and then like word finding or like naming all the words that you can think of that start with a Z, naming all the words you can start think of with a B. So kind of like those cognitive tasks were really the focus of my speech therapy.
Hmm. Wow.
Mhm.
And so those days in the hospital, I mean, did you feel like confused and kind of out of it, or how did you feel?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, the first few days, like that I remember coming, weaning off during the day. It like I kind of knew what was going on after people had told me, but like I was also on so much pain meds that like I didn't really feel anything. Um,
Yeah.
like I remember when they pulled my like feeding tube out and stuff like that, and I can still like when I think about it, I can still feel it, but like it was like numb as
Hmm.
well. Um, yeah, and then it kind of like started setting in when I can't remember which doctor was like, yeah, you're probably not gonna like finish high school with your graduate with the class you started with, and uh, and then I was like, oh, like this might be kind of serious. Um, but again, you're like 17 years old, right? It happened during the summer in between junior and senior year, and
Yeah.
uh, you kind of feel like you're invincible in that part of your life, and
Hmm.
you're not. But um, there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of stubbornness. And I told the doctor, I was like, no, I would, and I did, and that. Yeah,
Wow.
I think like some of that is like that plays into that recovery process, be it TBI, be it addiction, be it mental health or trauma, whatever it is, right? Cancer, is there's a part of you that needs to just kind of draw the line in the sand and say we got to do this, right? And
Hmm.
go and asking for help too, right? You can't do it on your by yourself. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was so started to feel kind of like it was a big deal, but like again, I was pretty numb to everything with the pain meds. Um, but they're like he may need to learn how to learn how to walk again. So like in the ICU, I think my first walking was with a wheelchair and then three nurses around me around the nursing station. And so you go from like this high functioning, like independent, 17-year-old to like needing people to walk with you, right, in a matter of days. Um, and then like it wasn't really until I was in the 7 days of rehab that more of like this like internal reflection started coming back, where it was like,
Hmm.
what does this mean? Like, what is it? Why do I get so like tired just like taking a shower and needing to take a
Yeah.
nap, right? That fatigue with TBIs is really significant, or it can be. And then needing help to like do those normal routines, right? And you're just like, where did I lose my independence and then identity? So there's like grief and loss that's all embedded in there. Um, yeah, it was also during that time though where I was like, I'm probably gonna land somewhere in this profession, like this helping sector,
Mm.
be it nurse, PT, speech therapist, OT, right? And then my sister, who's also a social worker, was like, "Hey, you should check this out." And that was that
Yeah.
was a year or a few years or a few months afterwards. But
So pretty quickly afterwards is when you realize that this was your calling, your passion to help people with this kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, somewhere right in there. I didn't know where yet, and it took
Hmm.
talking to my sister and a few volunteer activities to be like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And yeah, then finished and to adjust my high school schedule. So I did like 2 half days because I would come home and like sleeping was big with the TBI. So I was sleeping 16 some hours a day. Like I would
Wow.
come from a half day of school, take a 2 3 hour nap, and then sleep another 12 13 hours at night.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, we just had Carrie Cooper on the podcast last week, and she was talking about sleep. That's her. She's a sleep coach, and she
mhm.
was saying how important it is for brain function and recovery and healing. So I
Hmm.
imagine healing from a TBI would include a lot of sleep to try to
Yeah.
get that healing in. So
Yeah.
that's pretty important in that process.
Hmm. But it's also like it's kind of a double-edged sword because if you just sleep, you get nothing done, right? You also
Yeah.
building that endurance. And I
Hmm.
remember not liking my like speech and physical therapist when they would tell me I had to get up in the inpatient rehab bed.
You're like, I
So
just want to sleep, leave me alone.
yeah, but they're like, no, you got
Yeah.
to go do like electrotherapy because like everything on this side of my face shut down from them having to cut in and stuff like that.
Oh
So
wow. So it was like paralyzed part of your
yeah,
face?
yeah, it was like paralysis essentially.
Yeah.
So, but then to get the neurons firing, they like shock you with like four AA batteries to like get the muscle fibers to reconnect and stuff.
Is that like
Wow.
the Thames machine, I think they call it? That
I I have
electrotherapy?
no idea. I know what they called it there, but it was like a nickname. They called it a bumblebee because it like stung, but that was like
Oh
their
wow.
nickname. And then like they
Yeah.
would
Wow.
like shock me and like my eye would just blink by itself and I wasn't trying to do it.
Wow.
Weird.
So yeah, it's pretty funky, but looking back now, I'm like, yeah, probably helped a lot.
Yeah, I bet. So what would you
Which, how
say
much,
the Oh,
oh,
go
my
for
bad,
it,
bro.
Brandon.
Why I wanted to ask, like, for behavioral changes or anything that was immediate, did you have any struggles reacclimating behaviorally or like with motor function or anything like that? Like, I know you went to physical therapy, but did you notice any stark changes because of the brain injury? Like, oh man, like I'm
I
having a
mean,
hard time socializing or.
yeah. So like behaviorally, from a physical standpoint, I lost like 20 pounds, like because I was on feeding tube, right? Like all that stuff,
Mm,
Mm.
10 days or 9 days in the ICU, 8 days when I was, and then I started eating in the ICU. Um,
lucky.
but like behaviorally, it was more of like irritability and that anger, right? That would come out and over very innocuous things or simple things. Like I remember my dad was putting the dishes away, was went to work very very early and I could hear the dishes in my room and I just like blew up, right? Even though he was just doing what he normally does for the last 30 some years, right? But to me, it
Mm.
was like, holy man, it was big.
Mm.
Uh, so that was like socially not so much. I mean, I noticed my mental filters and like my jokes would not always land. And
Mm,
I would use humor as sometimes like a compensating mechanism.
Hmm.
But sometimes my humor would miss the mark because my filters weren't there like they used to be, right? And that took some time. And even now, like I notice too, when I get very tired, like some of that filter can still kind of fade. So that's why sleep is still important, right? Like you can't just like nix it, uh, especially with TBIs. But
hmm.
yeah, that anger was a big one for a while, and my own counseling and stuff like that to work through it and just notice and be able to kind of. I remember going to therapy and being angry and then coming out and feeling like 1,000 pounds was off my back. I was like, wow, this feels wonderful. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I did notice a lot of like not this wasn't well it was I guess you could say it's under the TBI umbrella, but it was like after my first or second concussion, then I started having falling asleep issues. Before that, I could just fall asleep like whenever I wanted, wherever. And then I would like if I wanted to fall asleep by 10, I would have to go to bed at 8 because I would just like ruminate in my head and I would get so angry at myself that I couldn't fall asleep. And then that took probably like 8 or 9 months just to break that cycle. So
Wow.
that's not like behaviorally, but like that would be like more like internal from a mental health.
Or even depressive, because I would imagine like being in that cycle, you would probably start, because rumination is, I mean, a hallmark for depression, but being stuck in that as well. But it also makes me wonder if you battled with like dissociative effects and stuff like that, like trying to distance yourself from who you wanted to be versus who you were post, TBI. Especially being so young, it'd be really hard to have that awareness, like, oh man, this is how I'm feeling. It's like being 17. You
Hmm.
just don't really have the mental faculties to be able to like it's not the same as being an adult, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if I would. I think dissociation was there, but it wasn't for that. It was more so like I would become so mentally fatigued, I would just check out.
yeah.
Um, but like I was very much in touch of like the identity shifts that were going on, the grief and loss related to friendships and dynamics and what I could do before, what I couldn't do now, right? Um, so going back and forth, I was pretty in touch with those pieces, and because I was in touch with them, like I felt them, but there wasn't dissociation related to those aspects. But
I mean,
definitely,
that's like the healthy way to go, you know.
well,
That's
looking back, it is, but in the moment, you're just like,
yeah.
do I feel this? Do I not feel it? Right? Do I find something to numb it out? Like, what do
Mhm.
you do? Right? And that's how addictions start often.
Mhm.
Uh, so I think, yeah, I mean, however I handled it probably the best way I could. But again, that comes back to, support system, all those different things, asking for help. And um,
Yeah,
yeah,
the family unit, you know, and it really makes me reflect on, because I mean, familiar dynamic is going to have such an impact on that. Because, I mean, a lot of 17-year-olds going through something similar would probably have turned to drugs or alcohol or retreating into themselves instead of
Mhm.
addressing their emotions, accepting, going through the grief process, and moving forward,
yeah.
one of my big questions is, so how do you think that this has impacted your career other than, choosing your career? Do you find that you try to focus more on people who have been through similar situations, or do you try to like relate with people or help people in any sort of way that have gone through that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like I mean, I work with a lot of men who have experienced
I
trauma,
don't mean
chronic
to dive
stress,
into your work,
yeah,
but yeah.
yeah, traumatic brain injuries and stuff like that. Um, I don't necessarily say I'm only going to work with people who have traumatic brain injuries or anything. Um,
Mm,
but I think it does give you like an empathetic standpoint from like having your back up against the wall. And I think again, that comes back to that adversity piece that I spoke on earlier is like if we can look and pull from those adverse challenges that we had maybe during childhood, maybe during high school, maybe during early adulthood, right? If we lost a partner that, we were married to, we're going to be married to, and life switched, right? Like if we can take I don't not lessons but use that connection that we have to those our emotional state, our our drive, our passion, our character, like we can shed a lot of light, right, or share a lot and help a lot of people heal. uh,
mm. Yeah,
so
having that grit.
yeah, I mean I think having that grit and being like, my job as a therapist is to support you, it's also to challenge you, right? Because like we don't grow in our comfort zones. And that was something like they were telling me when I was like, I just want to stay in my bed in the inpatient rehab. Like they're like,
Mhm.
"You don't grow, let's go, And like
Yeah.
back then I was like, what the hell, and maybe some cussing. But like at that point, I didn't know any better. And now I'm like, wow, if I would have known,
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common issue with a lot of therapists that they don't really push their patients, past their comfort zone. They really just kind of coddle them and
Hmm.
listen, and they don't really take the next step to really dive deeper and really get into those hard topics.
Yeah, yeah, and oftentimes they may like I feel like a lot of people that come to start therapy are like, hey, I have anxiety, I feel very overwhelmed, or I don't feel like I'm myself, or I can't connect with my emotions. But then as you start going through the layers, there are these like things in the past, relationship betrayal, whatever it might be, a divorce of your
Mhm.
parents, right? How it could be anything, right? Near death experience. And then it's like, boom, holy man, like now we start really working on those inner issues of self-esteem, self-worth, right? How do you
Mhm.
see yourself? How does the world see you?
Mhm.
And it can be very powerful. And that's where a lot of the healing takes place.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in talk therapy for a few years now, and I find it really helpful. Obviously some therapists are better than others and they have different specialties and different approaches. But that's something that I'd like to do, is to try to dive deeper and try to get to the root cause of some of the things that I've been dealing with in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you're working with clients, how do you bridge that gap from just talking about day-to-day anxiety and depression and whatever things are going on in their life to get into those deeper issues?
So I do a, I mean, that's a very good question. And I think one, it takes a lot of rapport, a lot of connection, a lot of trust.
Yeah.
And then two, it also takes tuning into the body and asking some of those deeper questions like, how long has this been in your life?
Hmm.
Right? And they're like, well, like I've only noticed it 3 years ago or 5 years ago. But 5 years ago, something changed. And, maybe I stopped using alcohol 5 years ago. And now I have this anxiety, right? And then it's like, well, how long has alcohol been in the picture? Like, well, maybe like 15 years, right? And then you like go,
Yeah.
you just kind of follow the thread back, right? Um,
Hmm.
but I do a lot of bottom up therapy, so like body nervous system, so like eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, somatic experiencing therapy, and I think the body will hold and the body will tell you where it needs to go if we
Hmm.
can tune into it enough. But
Yeah.
oftentimes, like we live in a fast-paced society, most of the people's lives are fast-paced, stressed, and we just lose the mind-body connection. No fault of
Yeah.
our. It's just
Right.
hard to track it all the time when there's maybe your kids are in three different extracurricular activities. You're working a double two jobs or a double shift 1 2 days a week, and then your spouse or partner is working too, and it's just like
Hmm.
you just don't have time until you carve out the time to say, no, I'm going to tune in here, and then you notice all these different ripple effects starting.
Yeah. When you're feeling shitty, it's so easy just to go grab some McDonald's or just go get a donut or something versus sitting with yourself and trying to reflect on your feelings and
Hmm.
why you're feeling the way you are. It's really
Yeah.
about
I
putting
mean,
in that work.
Yeah.
that's the tough part, man, is being able to sit with yourself. It's funny, whenever I think about like this conversation, I think of Carl Rogers and a lot of his research on like schizophrenia, and he actually has books where he goes through his case studies, and his main objective was to create an environment where the person could meet with themselves.
Hmm.
And so I often think about that, how, we, like you said, we get, especially in cities, there's so much aggression, so much anxiety, so much fast pace, so much stimulus.
Yeah.
We're
So much
just
Mm,
constantly
noise.
bombarded with, advertising, colors, motions, noise, and it's tough to, especially now with phones, it's like we're constantly connected, television, watching shows, video games, drinking, hanging out with friends, and enough. And even going back to the traumatic brain injury, it's like whenever we have trauma in our life, it's almost like we get thrusted back into the moment, and it kind of forces us to peel back some of those layers rather than just run,
mhm.
If we
because
if we
yeah,
can
it's
use
tough, man. Yeah, if we can, exactly, if we can embrace it, because the thing is, if we, it's really up to us how we, confront our challenges, whether we.
This episode is brought to you by LaunchYourEvolution.com, where you can get my top 3 downloads, including my portable protein solutions, your ultimate guide to high protein, low carb eating anywhere, anytime, my effortless high protein, low carb meals, a mini cookbook including 3 recipes to kickstart your health evolution, and my 30-day habit tracker, a way to easily develop a new healthy habit to significantly improve your overall well-being in just 30 days. And there's also a ton of other free resources available for you to enjoy. You can also learn more about my 6-week holistic health transformation course that will guide you step by step on how to develop a lifestyle that will enhance your overall well-being and ignite the flame that will launch your health evolution. LaunchYourEvolution.com. Go there, check it out now. Now back to the show.
Embrace it, accept the situation, try to make the best of it, or whether we, don't accountability, blame it on other people. And this can really be, applied to anything in our lives, breakups, injuries, I mean, losing a
Yeah.
job.
Car
It's
accidents,
being
everything.
able to, yeah, accept the situation and then dig into that mental grit and be like, what, no, I'm gonna be okay.
Mm.
Like I can sit with myself and be honest with myself. Like right now I'm not happy. Like right now I'm sad or I'm frustrated or, and this is something that I've been feeling a long time. And I think that's a lot of times where that growth comes in.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of the videos I used to listen to these like 10 years ago always talked about like the stimulus for growth is discomfort.
Hmm.
And like oftentimes we just numb it out. We avoid it. We whatever we go on our phone, right? Versus just sitting and being like, wow, how can this like propel me?
I mean, the world kind of teaches us that,
Sure.
through advertising, we're told that we should, never really feel that way, pursue passion, pursue happiness. And it's actually, in my opinion, one of the main contributing factors to like the rise in divorce rates and stuff is because we've lost what, marriage and relationships really are, and we've made it all about how I feel. But I mean, this is a whole different, topic that can just talk for hours,
Yeah.
but
I think it also
yeah,
contributes to
having those
burnout.
layers. Yeah.
Like when we can't like reflect and grow and move past and heal, right? We have all these different kind of potholes from 5, 10, even 6 months ago, or 5, 10 years, 6 months ago, just sucking energy,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And we can't show up, right? But like if we heal and we can just keep moving forward in the present moment.
It's one of the
Yeah.
things I always tell
Yeah.
people. I always tell people change is always good. Even if it seems negative, it thrusts you into the uncomfortable, and whenever you're in the uncomfortable, it forces you to grow. And given so does perseverance. I think persevering through those troubled times allows you to also grow in various ways, even though it may be more of the familiar. It's still uncomfortable because of that level of unhappiness or discomfort. Um, yeah, and so there's really. It's a cool conversation. We're really diving into this pretty deep. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we learn, and that's why you're like, well, one of the first questions you all had asked was like, you know, how did your TBI like navigate your life? And I was like, yeah, like the TBI directed it, but like looking back on even like my childhood and my upbringing, like I grew up picking stones on a farm. That sucked in the summer heat. I grew up baling
Hmm.
hay like 10 hours a day, just throwing bales.
Wow.
Like, you know, and I think like, yeah, the TBI did that. Like I grew up in athletics too, but like to forge that character through trials and build up that grit and that perseverance so that when something does come you have it to be back to lean on, right? And then you can keep moving.
Yeah, it really seems like having that struggle growing up really builds a lot of character in people,
Hmm.
and it can really
It
go a
does.
long way.
And I think people like almost need to have some, how do I want to say it, like it can be difficult to like even recognize it and even like lean into it. I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, like that was my childhood, but so what? And then it's like, well, like, whoa, like what'd you learn by walking miles in a field in
Mm.
sweltering sun, picking up rocks and throwing them in the
Yeah.
tractor trailer? It's like, well,
and
I
I
can.
think that's one of the biggest problems with any of us making mistakes, is a lot of times when we make a mistake, we immediately make a second mistake, and that is to deny that the first one ever happened.
Mhm.
And so we end up repeating things in our life over and over because we're blaming it on other things. Oh, it was the boss. Oh, it was the girl. Oh, it was the money. Oh, it was the car. Oh, it was, even accidents. Like, oh, it wasn't that I was going 90 miles an hour. It was that that person turned in front of me. And it's like, there's a certain level of accountability that we need to also take in order to grow, is like, all right, I was in this situation and it sucks. And yeah, there was external factors that were out of my control, but I still was in the situation, and I think that's where that grit comes in, but it also opens up the possibility for us to accept what has happened. Because
Mhm.
that level of adversity, one of the things I think about a lot is, there's people who go throughout their life without having any sort of major adverse events, like no car crashes, no drug
Hmm.
addiction, and then they end up in their 50s and 60s, and I know a few of them, and you can just kind of tell it's like, all right, like there's just a certain level of depth that you don't have
Hmm.
because you haven't experienced something very traumatic. Like,
Hmm.
and given, their parents still die and stuff like that. So, like, that is a certain level of adversity, but that happens so much later in their life. And so I think having that adverse event, especially at a young age, it really helps you to, be more empathetic. It helps you to be more emotionally intelligent, especially having to battle through it. And it sounds like you went through, you took the healthy path, accepted your emotions, you had a good support system. And so it really helped you to kind of lay down a successful life. And even though looking back, it's like, man, that was a really traumatic experience. I
Hmm.
wonder where you'd be if that had never happened, you
I know.
know?
I would definitely. I don't think I would be a therapist right now.
Yeah.
Because
That's kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
I
like
was either military or business track before that.
mhm.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. I mean, it is interesting, and I think it goes back to that support system too. Like when you go through adversity, and your support system's like, yeah, this sucks. Like, what do we do next? Right? Versus like, we're not going to support you, or you know, okay, let's just like not even believe this even happened or whatever it is, right? Like your support
Mhm.
system can play into that, just your own validation of it, of what
Yeah.
happened or like how significant it was.
I remember
How
doing
important
research on,
is
oh,
No,
sorry, Jeff, you go.
how important is that mindset to healing from TBI and other traumatic experiences, having that positive mindset
the positive mindset for the support network or for yourself.
for yourself in terms of healing from different trauma.
I mean, I don't know the research on it, but from my own perspective and what I've witnessed with clients, it goes back to like what Brandon said is, can you be accountable and responsible? Like, yeah, maybe that trauma wasn't your fault, but like
Hmm.
nobody is going to help you heal,
Yeah.
right? He's gonna like really push you to therapy or push you
Hmm.
to sit in silence or solitude, right? Like that has to be
Yeah.
something that's embraced, like Brandon said.
Well, like
And
when the doctor told you that you probably wouldn't be able to graduate with your class and you're like, no, I'm going to do it. I feel like that probably has a really significant impact on your healing.
I think it did looking back, but I honestly don't even know where that came from. If that was just stubbornness, if that was
Right.
just like,
At that
you
age.
know, like you're not gonna tell me what to do, like white
Hmm.
coat, like
Yeah.
I'm 17, you know, screw authority or whatever it was. Or was it my own blindness to being like, wow, I really didn't know how messed up I really was, like
Hmm. Yeah. I think it's
know
a
what
little bit of
I
both.
don't remember it that well. I just remember saying it.
Which I
So
don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. If it's
yeah.
like, I think in a lot of good decisions, there is a certain level of delusion, you know? And
Hmm.
given that doesn't mean that delusion is good. It just means
Mhm.
that a lot of times when, something great is required or the mentality that is needed is required, there is a certain level of delusion, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think,
Like when
the
the
mind is so powerful, like being able to tell yourself like, no, I'm okay, I'm going to overcome this, like that's huge, especially with traumatic experiences like that. I mean, there's so much stuff that could have came out of that.
Mhm.
I mean, it's literally endless, and a lot of people probably would have taken the wrong path, and not even just drugs and alcohol. It could have ended up just not wanting to improve, would have turned into loathing and depression,
Right.
and then just been bedridden for like the rest of their life because they would have succumbed to this, oh, my life, this happened to me, and completely changed their motivations on life into where now they're feeding off of other people's pity, you
Yeah.
know.
I will, so this kind of ties back to support network, but I will say that probably two of the biggest things that happened out of the accident was, or like after I kind of like got home, started to settle in, is I started going for walks and runs once I got cleared for running with the person I was in the car accident with.
Mm.
And then once I got cleared, him and I started working out together back in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like those pieces, right? There you have support network, social connection, you have a healthier outlets, right? Solitude in some sense, right? Of lifting, like I mean, yeah, there's music on, but like it's just you and the weights or you in the bar or whatever it is, or you on a country road walking, right?
Mm.
Talk. So I feel like those are very two big things that almost I don't want to say accelerated because I feel like there's always like an urge to like heal faster to like get it done. And like recovery is a process. And even though there's
Mm.
that urge, I feel like those are two very, very big things that just kept the momentum moving in the right direction. Right.
I
Yeah,
almost wonder
definitely.
too, from you being with the person who you were in the accident as well, like how much healing that brought about.
Hmm.
Because you
Oh
could have
yeah.
festered like certain levels of resentment or unforgiveness, even blame to a certain degree. And
Yeah.
that all kind of cycles back into, the acceptance cycle of like denial and aggression and all that, you know.
It definitely can. In my situation, it actually didn't have any because without him, like he was the one that found their cell phones, called EMS, like was like, we need help. Tried to
Mm.
get me out of the well, tried to wake me up to get me out of the car. I wasn't waking up though because I was knocked out. Um, so without him, and then without like him calling his family member that was a nurse and being like, no, you got to go to a trauma hospital, like all those factors like saved my life, right?
Oh yeah.
So,
Wow.
so for me, like this is very interesting in terms of a trauma response. I would only trust my family members to drive me after the accident and him.
Oh.
Wow.
And was he the
That's
driver?
interesting.
He was, yeah.
He was. Oh wow. Huh.
Yeah.
And you still trusted him after the accident?
To drive, yeah. Yeah. He would
Wow.
drop me off at school sometimes. Yeah.
Mm.
Because they took my license for a few months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think there's like that trauma healing, definitely, Brandon, right? And
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean there could be, resentment, all that other pain that does come with trauma, and I'm sure it does come up in certain, situations, but it wasn't in mine. It was very interesting. It was actually very, very healing for me because it was him and his family were some of the first people that came to visit me once I could have family
Mm.
in the
When it
hospital.
makes me think of his response, and given though that's an external factor, but it's like by him, taking it seriously, going above and beyond, and really sacrificing himself to make sure that you're okay. It created that bond, that trusting environment that even in therapy sessions, it's like that's what you're trying to create, is
Hmm.
that familiarity and that level of trust where you almost feel like at home with that person, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Hmm.
mentioned somatic therapy. Um,
Hmm.
what what kind of methods do you use for treating clients with traumatic brain injuries? Is that one of them? Are there others?
Yeah, I mean, I've done EMDR therapy with people who have TBIs. I've done somatic work with people who have TBIs or somatic experiencing therapy. Um, it comes down to like A, if they know what they want to work on. B, it also comes down to this like how are you presenting in session? Like
Mm-hmm.
if a lot of times after trauma, falls, car accidents, something like that with the TBI, like your nervous system is already dysregulated, and sometimes just regulating the nervous system in and of itself can be very a powerful intervention. So a lot of our work just starts there. And how do you create like these little pockets of safety in your own inner world, your own body, your own, environment? How do you notice cues of safety and really take them in? Like when Brandon said that, like building that attachment that you build with the therapist and safety, like with that person, I had a big exhale and I was like, yeah, that is there with that person, right? It like that
Mm-hmm.
was just like a somatic response to even just like me thinking about that, right?
Mm.
So really it's just cueing in and noticing, paying attention, tracking, noticing, naming, and sometimes with the TBI, like your head literally feels like it's a jar of pickles, like just shooken, right? Or shaken. And sometimes your body doesn't even know what's going on. And it's just
Mm.
like, let's just slow down and just notice, settling into the chair and how that feels,
Yeah.
right? Could just be a little bit of respite from everything internal that's going on.
So it really depends on the specific issues the client's working with. It's like a case
Yeah,
by case basis.
for sure. Because sometimes people come in, they're like, yeah, I have a TBI, but it's a mild concussion or a moderate concussion, right? And they're
Hmm.
just like, yeah, but I just have issues with anger, right?
Yeah. So what is EMDR?
So EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. So both somatic experiencing therapy and EMDR are bottom-up forms of therapy, and creating
Hmm.
safety in the body, nervous system regulation. And then from there, they work to heal like the brain stem, the limbic system, and then the cerebral cortex versus talk therapy is inverse of that, right? It's just
Hmm.
reverse. Um,
Yeah.
but so EMDR was started in 1980s by Dr. Shapiro. Um, it essentially is trying to ignite your own body's innate ability to heal. And sometimes people are like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's like if you cut your hand cutting carrots and it's not a bad cut, like consciously, you don't have to tell your body to heal, it just does it. So
Yeah.
then, like, that's the philosophy is applied to like our inner world, our trauma, right? Mental health. It's like, so what's getting in the way of the healing? Because if that cut was infected, then there would be symptoms, pus, redness, right?
Hmm.
Just like if something in the body was infected, anxiety, self-loathing, internal hate, self-harm, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Then through EMDR, you trying to think of a way to describe this. You try to ignite that self-healing process by bilateral stimulation, right? So either
Mm.
eye movements that go back and forth. So bilateral meaning one side to one side. So anything that crosses the midline. I do a lot of tapping in my sessions versus eye movements. And then you can also use like a light bar that has a light on one side and it moves back and forth. There's a
Hmm.
EMDR like website that you can use that has a little ball that moves back and forth too. But yeah, I use EMDR and then I really enjoy somatic experiencing too.
What's your take on psychedelic therapy?
I, to be honest, don't even have enough information on it to give an opinion. And
I
I,
appreciate that
I just
answer.
need, I just need to stay in my lane of I'm seeing research that says it's very good and it's very potent, and I see
Hmm.
some research that says, yeah, like, but are the effects long lasting? Is it leading to other forms of avoidance or so
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for
All
the
right.
research to come out and
Yeah. So then
Man,
there's
we
some
did a
very exciting
podcast.
research.
Oh yeah, we did a podcast with this doctor like a month ago, who is all into psychedelics now, and some of the
Hmm.
research is just astounding.
Mhm.
They did an MRI with somebody who was in the middle of a psilocybin therapy session, and they found just an explosive amount of dendrite growth in the
Mhm.
middle of the session. And then he was saying it's like an 80 to 100% remission after a year for PTSD, depression. Because so the whole thing is just, I haven't really dove into it personally, but
Mhm.
it's, I'm just starting to get into it, and man, looks very promising. It looks
Yeah.
extremely
Yeah,
promising.
Yeah,
it
it'll
does.
be interesting to see where it goes and yeah, I think it'll be but I mean, I think I've seen like just like ketamine, for example, I've seen some people benefit and I've some people really struggle with it.
Mm.
I think the
Um,
Yeah. So,
tranquilizers, like I personally, I think the tranquilizers are different, and it's so ketamine still is like a mild psychedelic. I don't
mhm.
see it the same as like MDA therapy or psilocybin therapy though. And given the research on ketamine therapy is still pretty good, but I could definitely see it being a little bit different. So my understanding, at least from that podcast, was so for a psilocybin therapy session, you go in, you're with the therapist, you write down all your thoughts, and then for about 4 or 5 months afterwards, you actually go over what you said, you know,
Mhm.
and And I think what it does is similar to what we were saying, it allows us to kind of peel back those layers,
Hmm.
especially if you're
Yeah.
in an environment where you trust your therapist, you know.
Hmm.
And so I think it just has the potential to accelerate. And given, I'm not a pro at it, and so, but it does kind of lean into what we were already saying, especially in, traumatic brain injuries, because I remember from school learning about like, you know, somatic disorders and conversion disorders and traumatic injuries, and so there's really extreme examples of what can happen to somebody when they go through a traumatic experience, and I think psilocybin can really help in a lot of those ways. But given it's still really young,
Hmm.
I know
Definitely.
Arizona's doing like a pilot program right now, but it's still years away from,
Yeah,
where it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. So
definitely.
we've got a few minutes left. Daniel, are there any actionable tips that listeners can apply if they're dealing with TBIs?
It's it's a I don't want to cop out and not answer the question. It's hard because every person's different, every TBI is different, even if it's a similar injury to the brain.
Yeah,
Um,
just like a general kind of
yeah, I think like
general advice.
definitely, I think trying to just slow down your inner world. And that is for like people who just have like a strong desire to heal, right? And I mean, a lot of people have a strong desire to heal, but we can't rush that process, right? Your body heals in
Yeah,
its own time, but sometimes people want to like try to fast track it, and become very impatient. So just being able to slow down and notice what is it in the present moment that is supporting you, that maybe you're grateful for, that you're noticing shift in the right direction, right? Maybe
hmm,
last week you could only remember 5 of 10 words and now you're at 8, right? So noticing
yeah,
some of the minute things, or maybe
hmm,
last week you couldn't do a flight of stairs, now you can do a flight of stairs, right?
yeah,
So focusing on just those incremental pieces can buy you the time for the process. I mean, I think for my fatigue levels to go down, it was like 2.5 years,
wow.
right?
Well,
So, like,
You gotta be patient.
yeah,
Just stick
I
with
mean, you
it.
you can't rush it, and
Yeah.
so I think, but I think I want to honor it too because there is that urge to like get back to what you could do, right?
Hmm.
And especially
Definitely.
like I was pretty fortunate, 17 going to be 18. I didn't have a family. I didn't have income that I needed to depend on.
Yeah.
Right. There are some people that have families that are the sole breadwinner. Now
mm,
they can't work, or they went from, 10K a month to living on disability with 3K a month, right? Or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
now their whole world is flipped upside down. Marriages fall apart, families start to struggle.
Yeah. It's tough.
There's a lot of healing to do with just the TBI population alone.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
we're out of time. Was there
Yeah. No,
anything else you wanted to touch on before we go?
No, I think this was a great conversation with you both. Thank you so much for having me. Truly appreciate it.
yeah, it was
Definitely.
fun
Where
talking.
can listeners get in touch with you?
So they can check out my website, www.revitalizementalhealth.com. Um,
Hmm.
check out the blog there. If you're in Wisconsin or Colorado, I can legally work with you. So, but if you're outside of that, I can't. So,
Good to know.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Brandon. We enjoy having you on as well, always.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, that's it. Bye, everybody.